In Newcastle, predictions of gloom are circulating concerning the future of steel making in the city. The federal member for Newcastle, Mr Alan Morris, says the BHP is being uncooperative and evasive with the Hawke government. He is joining the ACTU in its bid to prevent the BHP making any changes to its employment level while the government is formulating a national steel policy.
I think BHP is pursuing what it sees as its own objectives. Whether they coincide with government, the community of Australia, seems to be quite secondary. And that's my major concern, is that the BHP, as a large corporation, has to be a responsible corporation, and that doesn't just mean that it does what the government says. It means it takes into account the whole of Australia in whatever it's doing.
The ACTU is also calling for a moratorium on job retrenchments at the BHP, but the Trades Hall Council Secretary, Mr Peter Barrick, says the union body wants certain conditions to prevail if the government comes to the aid of the ailing BHP.
It's a meeting convened in Sydney yesterday by the ACTU of all steel industries unions, discussed the 15-point program that the ACTU has drafted up. Arising out of that, the two key issues we see is the probable protection that BHP is going to get from the federal government, and what conditions are going to be put on it. And what we're seeking is an immediate moratorium on jobs until such times as that assistance is determined.
In answer to Mr Morris's claims, the BHP says it has no intention of halting steel-making production here in Newcastle. It says its recent retrenchments are all part of a very necessary rationalisation scheme.
Mr Hindley delivered his speech to the conference late yesterday afternoon. He refused to elaborate on camera, but his speech contained some rather significant criticisms of the Hunter District Water Board's decision to go ahead with the Tillegra Dam site. In his address, Mr Hindley said that a group of people with relatively little background or knowledge of the various proposals wished to promote Tillegra. He went on to say, comparing Johnson's Creek Dam and Tillegra Dam, quote, "It would be totally irresponsible and criminal to select Tillegra." He lists a number of reasons: the loss of fertile land, the fact that Tillegra requires more fill than Johnson's Creek, and various costings which have been carried out. In 1975, the Hunter District Water Board approved the Johnson's Creek Dam. However, the board's latest decision appears to have overthrown that earlier plan. With government support, the board is looking at building Tillegra Dam when needed sometime in 1997. In conclusion, Mr Hindley said that the Snowy Mountains Engineering Corporation should be asked to update its engineering and costing information on both dams to remove any doubt about which one should proceed.
Thanks, John. Good morning. We have high pressure over New South Wales now. It's moving over towards the coast. Another southerly change expected late Friday or Saturday in Newcastle. At the moment, nice blue clear skies, the sun's up, winds from the west and waves around 1.2 to 1.5 metres. Some of the biggest set waves are coming in around 1.8 metres, but a little bit infrequent now because that swell's starting to drop. The swell's also a little bit bumpy this morning because of those southerly winds yesterday and not as clean as it's been for the last few days. The more rideable beaches in the southern protected corners, Stockton, Nobbies, Blacksmiths here at Merewether, but you'll find reasonable waves towards high tide later this morning at all of the open beaches in town. If you'd like to go for a swim, take care, still sweeps to the north and strong rips at all of the city beaches. It's between the fags only at this stage. And for our weather today, the Bureau forecast early fogs and then a cool to mild and sunny day. Light winds tending southeast at 10 to 20 knots on the coast, seas slight on a low to moderate swell. Newcastle and Scone both expecting a top today of 23 degrees. Low tide at 26 minutes past 8 this morning, 0.5 of a metre. High tide at 2:41 this afternoon, 1.2 metres. And the outlook for Thursday, dry, mild with early fogs. Well, that's the story for today. Waves around 1.2, 1.5 metres for the board riders, occasionally just a little bit bigger. The swell not as clean as it could be, but the best waves will be found later this morning. Weather-wise, a nice sunny day coming up, clear and mild, and then a cool southerly change headed our way late Friday or Saturday. Have a great day. See you again tomorrow morning.
Witnesses saw the roof of the car blown off by the blast. The two survivors of the explosion reported to be in a critical condition in the town's hospital. This latest attack is one in a long history of violence in the northern Basque region, where radicals are trying to secure the area's separation from Spain. It's thought the dead and injured were a Basque guerrilla bombing team, responsible for another bomb which exploded in a nearby bank only 20 minutes later. Banks have frequently been bombed in the past for the non-payment of revolutionary taxes.
Today's meeting was subdued. All union officials could really do was recount their fruitless efforts to discuss with the state government the $8.9 million ferry contract which yesterday was granted to Carrington Slipways. Although obviously bitter about the government's cold shoulder, the meeting did record a note of goodwill to their brothers at Carrington Slipways. It's their good luck and our bad luck, one speaker said, claiming Carrington's tender was $500,000 under that of the state dockyard. But the meeting blamed the contract loss and the $4 million overrun on the first two ferries on the dockyard's outdated facilities. Committees are being formed to pressure the government into reinvesting in the state dockyard to make it competitive. The meeting was also told ship repair business is down 50%, and to correct that situation, industrial action has been suggested. The plan being to get maritime unions to hold up a loaded coal ship until the ship's owners agree to put repair work into Australian shipyards. Just how much work such drastic action might produce remains uncertain. But it does seem that one way or another, if the dockyard is to go down, then it won't go down quietly.
A representative of the Registered Clubs Association of New South Wales is touring the state in a bid to gain support for a publicity campaign to win back patrons. The club industry is at an all-time low. Officials claim that random breath testing and other measures have already cost the industry 2,000 jobs. In Newcastle last night, representatives from 50 clubs in the Newcastle district were given details of the promotion campaign. It involves giving away free prizes, such as cars, to people who use the clubs. Each club has to buy into the scheme, and that has raised a few doubts in the minds of club officials. However, support appeared to be forthcoming at last night's meeting. The campaign will only run if there is enough support from clubs throughout New South Wales, and that will not be known until the end of the month. A representative of the Registered Clubs Association, Mr Ron Hughes, believes the campaign will get off the ground.
The club industry is getting right behind it. Every meeting we've held so far, of which there is now 22 meetings held throughout the metropolitan area of Sydney and in the country areas, we have had total endorsement of the campaign, and all the clubs who were hesitant are all coming in.
Once again, it appears Kearns' development plans in the city have been thrown out the window. Trouble arose when Kearns wanted to negotiate a reduction in the purchase price of $7 million for the Waratah site. The council would not be moved on the issue. Kearns also put a number of options to the town clerk, which have been rejected. In a report on the management and development of the Waratah estate, Mr Lewis makes these comments about Kearns. I feel that the Kern Corporation should have had stronger input into the planning and problems associated with Waratah Estate. Instead, they sought studies from independent organisations, and the main thrust of negotiations were directed at reducing the purchase price. The recommendation before the council is that it become the sole developer of the Waratah estate via a city development corporation and the appointment of a project manager, Mr John Rippon. So now we're back to the starting point. After 2 years of ideas, the Waratah issue is back in the council's lap, without the money they expected to make from the sale of the site. Can they go it alone? It was once thought impossible.
I don't think don't think there'll be any hesitation by council in going alone. I think that we're in a better position than a developer would be because we don't have to borrow money on the land. And the interest payments on $4 million are quite considerable under these economic circumstances with high interest rates and so forth. So we've got a better position than Kearns would have. And I think that the people who've offered to do the planning for us and the development for us as project managers are going to be able to do it at a less cost than what it would have been if Kearns had done it.
Newcastle Rep's new show, Philadelphia Here I Come, has broken a month-long drought for Newcastle theatre. While other companies have been forced to cancel or postpone shows, Newcastle Rep is looking stronger than ever. Just after the curtain fell on opening night, I asked audience members what they felt about Philadelphia Here I Come.
I thought it was terrific, very powerful performances by everybody, and I congratulate the whole cast and the director.
I thought it was different and very, very enjoyable, most enjoyable.
And what did you find the most interesting thing about it?
Oh, the doubling up of the character, the main character. Very well done, I thought.
Do you think that's something that will confuse audiences?
Oh, I shouldn't think so. No, I don't think so. Once you get used to it, no, you can actually see the character thinking and acting out his life and reminiscing.
So will you be recommending this play?
My word, yes.
Thank you.
For the last 15 years, I've been suggesting in no uncertain terms that the present Income Tax Act of Australia should be thrown out the window. And I say that because, in my view, it's totally unfair and heavily biased in favour of the tax collector. And I think it also encourages tax evasion and tax avoidance. If you're a property owner and you've borrowed money to buy that property, and the rent that you receive from that property is not classed as a commercial rent, well then I'm about to say be prepared for a shock. Following a recent ruling, and it is a change in interpretation, let me add, by the Victorian Tax Department, they're now suggesting, and I think with some hide, because this practice has been going on for 40 years, that the interest that you pay on the money that you borrow to buy that property, if it doesn't almost match the rents that you receive, well then they will disallow the interest claim in part or in full. Now I take you back to the ethics of the situation, and we saw the same thing with regard to the government's move to try and tax the capital gains on discounted bonds. That was quickly nipped in the bud, I'm pleased to say, and for once the people of Australia beat the tax department. Now let me repeat, up till now, anyone who borrowed money could claim the interest, whether they made a profit or not, as a tax deduction. We're now being told, not nationally, but by one state taxation office, that they've changed their interpretation. I'm sure that's going to be subject to challenge, but if you are in that situation, well, once again, I think you should complain to your local Member of Parliament, and I mean your federal Member of Parliament, because if they want to change the rules, they should change the rules, as we'll say from the 1st of July, not after the game has started. I'll leave that thought with you, and I'll see you next Monday.
They're not polished. You right, Terry? I'll get out. Yeah. Thanks, Graham.
You'll be here for a while, yeah? If you go, sure. Somebody.
Yeah.
How long do you reckon you'll be?
Oh, well, you know, it's probably a good 20 minutes. Yep.
shaft sinking will commence for the sewer outlet itself. Plans, I've spoken to the President of the Board this morning and asked that those plans be expedited. I'm looking towards a scene that maybe in the next 6 months we will see some works to alleviate the problem.
Although the Minister said a start would be made on a new outfall tunnel within 6 months, he would give no commitment on when the $30 million project might be finished. And in fact, a Water Board engineer was nonplussed at the Minister's statement. He said specifications for the initial shaft would not be ready until next year. There was also some difference of opinion on how long sewerage has been fouling nearby beaches.
The problem arises because there's been a tidal change, a wind change, and it arises only when there's an excess flowing through the sewage system. Now, when those three factors meet, there is a problem here.
This week, Mike, some of them, or two of them, happened in pre-season, and the third one was scarlet fever to one of our fellas, so that's a bit of a blow to us, yeah.
And plus you've lost two through suspension.
Yeah, KB's got a really good record of players that don't get involved in the skirmishes of game, but probably our softest player, Jason Kalski, got caught on the wrong end of the fist last week and he finished up off the park.
Kenny, you've got West Adelaide at home this weekend. How do you see the match going?
It's going to be a hard match because obviously they're playing a defensive type of play now and they're on top of the ladder. So I anticipate they'd be looking for a 1-0 win or a draw. And obviously it's up to us to make sure that we score plenty of goals and get the 3 points.
We've seen in 1983 that KB started off in financial strife. Everything seems to be rosy now. You're playing some very, very good football. And I believe you've got an extra surprise for KB supporters this year.
Yes, we have, Mike, as I was telling you earlier. Michael Shannon he's at Norwich City now. He's agreed to come back and play 6 games for Newcastle KB United in June, July. So that's going to be a great thrill for the sporting public of Newcastle.
Well, let's hope we see that swinging right arm of Mick Shannon's many times this year. And of course, Ken, his experience within the side is going to be a great benefit to the younger players of KB.
I think so. The fact with Mike Shannon is he's such a great guy and he talks to the players as if he's known them for years. And when he was out here last time, he was a tremendous hit with all the players. So I hope we see the swinging right arm 3 times a match.